Mercedes-Benz just dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the entire car market, and most buyers still don't fully understand what just happened. This wasn't a quiet press release or a routine update. This was a calculated move that instantly rattled competitors, confused dealers, and forced buyers to rethink everything they believed about luxury cars, pricing power, and brand dominance. Overnight, Mercedes signaled that the old rules of the auto industry no longer apply, and the fallout is spreading fast. For years, Mercedes-Benz positioned itself as untouchable, a brand that could charge more simply because of the badge on the hood. But now the company has made a stunning pivot that caught even insiders off guard. Prices, production strategies, and model priorities are being reshuffled at a scale we haven't seen before. Vehicles that were once considered unreachable are suddenly entering price brackets that threaten mainstream brands, while high-end trims are being redefined to justify their survival. Dealers were blindsided. Many had inventory ordered under the old assumptions, expecting strong margins and predictable demand. Instead, Mercedes pulled the rug out from under them, changing incentives, adjusting MSRP strategies, and quietly shifting which models get priority production. Some dealers are now sitting on vehicles that buyers hesitate to touch, while others can't keep newly repriced models on the lot for more than a few days. The real shock is how this move exposes cracks across the entire luxury market. BMW, Audi, Lexus, and even Porsche are now forced to respond, because Mercedes didn't just adjust prices, it changed the psychology of luxury buying. Customers are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Why pay more for a badge when performance gaps are shrinking? Why wait months for delivery when suddenly similar vehicles are available sooner and for less money? Under the hood, this bombshell is tied to deeper problems the industry has been trying to hide. Rising production costs, slowing global demand, and EV investments that haven't paid off as promised are squeezing margins from every direction. Mercedes chose to act instead of pretending everything was fine, and that decision may end up exposing just how fragile the entire premium segment has become. What makes this moment dangerous is timing. Interest rates remain high, buyers are stretched thin, and used car prices are no longer propping up new vehicle sales. By shaking up pricing now, Mercedes is forcing consumers to reevaluate what a luxury car is actually worth in real-world conditions, not in marketing slogans. That reevaluation doesn't stop at Mercedes showrooms, it spills into every dealership across the country. Even more alarming is what this means for resale values. Owners who paid top dollar just a year ago are starting to realize that depreciation could accelerate faster than expected. When a brand as powerful as Mercedes signals flexibility instead of exclusivity, the market listens, and resale algorithms adjust almost instantly. This single shift could erase billions in perceived value across the used luxury car market. And this isn't just about cars, this is about confidence. When a company that once dictated terms to the market suddenly changes its stance, it tells a story about pressure behind closed doors. Mercedes is still strong, but this move suggests it is no longer immune to economic reality. And once that illusion breaks, the entire industry feels the tremor. The biggest question now isn't what Mercedes did, but what comes next, because this bombshell has started a chain reaction that's only beginning to unfold. And as competitors scramble to protect their turf, buyers are about to see changes that would have been unthinkable just a short time ago, especially as the next phase of this strategy begins to reveal how far Mercedes is willing to go to protect its dominance, while quietly rewriting the future of the car market itself. And the next models caught in this shift are already creating tension inside showrooms, where sales staff are struggling to explain why yesterday's pricing logic no longer makes sense, and why the next announcement could change everything again just weeks from now. Inside Mercedes boardrooms, the conversation has clearly shifted from prestige at any cost to survival with strategy, and that change is now spilling into public view. The company is quietly rethinking which vehicles deserve long-term investment and which ones no longer justify their footprint. Sedans that once defined the brand are being questioned, while SUVs and high-margin trims are being repositioned in ways that signal a much harder, more defensive mindset. What's catching buyers off guard is how fast the messaging changed. Just months ago, Mercedes was pushing exclusivity, limited supply, and premium positioning. Now the tone is different. Suddenly there are incentives, faster delivery times, and configurations that seem designed to pull customers away from rivals rather than simply reinforce brand loyalty. That shift tells you demand is not where it needs to be, and Mercedes knows it cannot wait for conditions to improve on their own. This bombshell also exposes a growing divide between luxury image and real-world ownership costs. Insurance premiums, maintenance, software subscriptions, and repair complexity have been quietly eroding customer satisfaction. By adjusting prices and product focus, Mercedes may be trying to offset growing resistance from buyers who are tired of paying more every year for ownership experiences that don't always feel premium anymore. Suppliers are feeling the pressure too. When a manufacturer of this size changes direction, it ripples through the entire supply chain. Contracts get renegotiated, volumes get adjusted, and smaller suppliers suddenly face uncertainty. That kind of disruption doesn't stay invisible for long, and it often leads to delays, feature cuts, or silent cost-saving measures that customers only notice months later. Meanwhile, the electric vehicle strategy adds another layer of tension. Mercedes invested heavily in EV platforms with expectations of rapid adoption, but reality hasn't matched the forecasts. Slower EV demand, infrastructure concerns, and price resistance have forced painful recalculations. This bombshell move suggests Mercedes is now blending traditional powertrains and EVs more aggressively, trying to protect cash flow while still claiming leadership in electrification. Dealers are now stuck in the middle, trying to explain to buyers why the same vehicle costs less today than it did yesterday, or why certain trims suddenly disappeared. Sales teams are rewriting their pitches on the fly because the old luxury narrative doesn't land the same way anymore. Customers are more informed, more skeptical, and far less willing to accept vague explanations. What makes this situation volatile is how quickly consumer behavior can change once trust starts to wobble. Buyers who feel they overpaid don't forget, and they don't recommend the brand. Mercedes knows this, which is why the next phase of this strategy is likely to be even more aggressive, pushing value where it once pushed status, and using scale to defend market share rather than relying solely on reputation. And while the headlines focus on Mercedes, the real story is unfolding quietly as competitors scramble behind the scenes. Internal memos are being rewritten, pricing models recalculated, and future launches reconsidered. No one wants to be the next brand caught off guard by a sudden shift in buyer expectations that Mercedes just forced into the open, especially as the market braces for the next shock that could redefine what luxury means in an industry already under strain, and where the next few months may determine which brands adapt fast enough and which ones fall behind as the consequences of this bombshell continue to spread and reshape everything buyers thought they knew about the car market and the power balance within it. The most unsettling part of this bombshell is what it reveals about confidence at the top. When a legacy brand like Mercedes starts moving this decisively, it's rarely about opportunity alone, it's about pressure. Executives are clearly reading data that hasn't fully reached the public yet, data pointing to softer demand, longer holding periods, and buyers delaying decisions in ways that threaten the entire premium sales model. Financing is becoming a silent deal breaker. Monthly payments on luxury vehicles have reached levels that many longtime Mercedes customers simply refuse to accept. By recalibrating pricing and incentives, Mercedes is trying to keep those customers from walking away entirely, because losing a loyal buyer today doesn't just hurt one quarter, it weakens the brand for years. This bombshell is as much about retaining relevance as it is about selling cars. Another critical angle is how this move resets expectations for innovation. Mercedes has long justified premium pricing through technology, but software glitches, subscription fatigue, and confusing feature packages have chipped away at that justification. Buyers are starting to demand simplicity and reliability, not endless digital layers. This shift suggests Mercedes knows it must realign with what customers actually value, not what marketing departments assume they want. Used car markets are already reacting, listings are adjusting, auction prices are softening, and fleet buyers are reevaluating future purchases. When new car pricing becomes unstable, used values follow, and that creates a feedback loop that can either stabilize the market or push it into deeper uncertainty. Mercedes' decision has accelerated that process, and the effects are spreading faster than many expected. There's also a global dimension that can't be ignored. Demand patterns in Europe, China, and North America are diverging, and Mercedes can no longer rely on one region to carry another. This bombshell appears designed to rebalance global strategy, even if it means sacrificing sacrificing short-term prestige in certain markets to protect long-term volume and cash flow. Inside showrooms, the atmosphere has changed. Buyers are negotiating harder, asking sharper questions, and comparing brands more aggressively than ever before. The mystique that once shielded Mercedes from heavy discounting is thinning, and once that psychological barrier breaks, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Mercedes knows this, which is why the next steps will likely be calculated but bold. What makes this moment so important is that it may mark the end of an era where luxury brands could dictate terms without resistance. Mercedes has effectively admitted that the market now holds more power than the badge, and that admission alone reshapes the competitive landscape. Other brands may follow, but Mercedes will be remembered as the one that cracked the facade first. And as this shift continues, the questions only grow louder about which models will survive, which markets will be prioritized, and how far Mercedes is willing to go before the balance between luxury identity and mass market pressure reaches a breaking point. Because once that line is crossed, there may be no easy way back, and the next moves already being prepared behind closed doors suggest that this story is far from over, and that the consequences of this bombshell are still unfolding in ways that could redefine the entire automotive industry for years to come. One detail that's flying under the radar is how this bombshell changes the internal power dynamics within Mercedes itself. Engineering teams, product planners, and regional executives are now competing for resources in a tighter environment. Projects that once seemed guaranteed are being delayed or quietly shelved, while others are fast-tracked based purely on profitability rather than heritage or brand symbolism. That shift alone signals how serious the situation has become. Marketing strategy is also being rewritten in real time. Instead of aspirational messaging built around legacy and prestige, the focus is moving toward justification and reassurance. Mercedes now has to explain value, not assume it. That is a fundamental change for a brand that once set the benchmark others chased. When explanation replaces expectation, the entire tone of the brand evolves. This bombshell is also forcing Mercedes to confront a generational problem. Younger buyers are less loyal, more price sensitive, and more willing to jump between brands. For them, Mercedes competes not just with BMW or Audi, but with technology companies, EV startups, and even subscription-based mobility services. The old loyalty pipeline is weakening, and this move appears designed to plug that leak before it becomes irreversible. Fleet and corporate buyers are watching closely. These customers move volume, and they react quickly to pricing instability. If Mercedes can reassure them, it protects a crucial revenue stream. If not, competitors will step in immediately. This is why the company's next announcements matter so much, because a single misstep could push large buyers toward alternative brands for years. There is also the question of manufacturing footprint. Plants optimized for certain models may no longer align with revised priorities. That creates labor tension, efficiency challenges, and potential restructuring that rarely stays quiet for long. Whenever a major automaker starts shifting production strategy, it often precedes broader operational changes that ripple far beyond the factory floor. At the consumer level, perception is everything. Some buyers see this bombshell as an opportunity, finally getting access to Mercedes ownership at prices that feel justified. Others see it as a warning sign, questioning long-term value and brand stability. That split perception makes the market volatile, because momentum can swing rapidly in either direction based on the next headline. Competitors are already adjusting quietly. Lease programs are being tweaked, incentives repositioned, and upcoming launches reframed to avoid direct comparison. No one wants to be caught defending higher prices without a clear advantage. Mercedes has forced everyone into reaction mode, and in this industry, reacting is always more expensive than leading. As this unfolds, the silence between announcements becomes almost as telling as the news itself. What Mercedes chooses not to say, which models aren't mentioned, and which markets receive less attention will reveal the true priorities behind the scenes. And as analysts, dealers, and buyers read between the lines, the pressure continues to build, because every move from this point forward either reinforces this new strategy or exposes deeper instability that could trigger an even larger shift across the car market and reshape how luxury brands survive in an era where confidence is no longer guaranteed, and the next reveal could change everything yet again. Another layer of this unfolding bombshell is how it reframes Mercedes' relationship with risk. For decades, the brand could afford to take calculated risks because its margin cushion was strong. That cushion is thinner now, and this move suggests Mercedes is prioritizing certainty over ambition. Fewer experimental models, tighter trim structures, and clearer pricing ladders are all signs of a company trying to reduce volatility in an unpredictable market. Technology partnerships are also being reevaluated. Developing everything in-house once made sense when volumes and margins supported it. Now, Mercedes appears more open to collaboration, cost sharing, and even outsourcing certain systems to remain competitive. While this may improve efficiency, it also dilutes differentiation, further intensifying the pressure to justify premium positioning. Customer feedback is suddenly carrying more weight. Complaints that might have been dismissed in the past are now shaping decisions. Long wait times for parts, confusing software updates, and inconsistent dealership experiences are being acknowledged because ignoring them now carries real financial consequences. This bombshell signals that Mercedes can no longer rely on patience from its customer base. There is also a strategic recalibration around speed. Product cycles that once stretched comfortably are being shortened, not to chase innovation headlines, but to respond faster to market signals. That urgency tells you the data Mercedes is seeing is not reassuring. When a company this established accelerates decision-making, it's often reacting to stress rather than chasing growth. Investors are reading this carefully. Stability matters more than spectacle right now, and Mercedes is trying to present this shift as disciplined leadership, but markets tend to test that narrative, especially if future earnings reflect tighter margins or inconsistent volumes. The next earnings calls will likely be scrutinized line by line for signs that this bombshell was a proactive reset rather than a forced retreat. From the buyer's perspective, uncertainty cuts both ways. Some will rush in, fearing prices could rise again or certain models could disappear. Others will wait, expecting deeper adjustments. That hesitation can stall sales, creating a self-fulfilling cycle that pressures manufacturers to act again. Mercedes is walking a fine line between stimulating demand and destabilizing it further. What's clear is that this is not a one-time announcement. This is the opening move in a longer campaign to reposition the brand in a market that no longer rewards confidence alone. Each subsequent decision will build on this moment, either restoring trust or compounding doubt. And as this strategy continues to unfold, the auto industry is watching closely, because if Mercedes succeeds in navigating this shift, it will rewrite the playbook for luxury survival. But if cracks begin to show, the consequences could accelerate faster than anyone expects, especially as economic pressures intensify and the next round of changes begins to surface in ways that once again catch the market off guard and push this story into an entirely new phase that is already starting to take shape behind the scenes. What makes this moment especially tense is how little room Mercedes now has for error. Every adjustment is magnified because the market is already on edge. A small miscalculation in pricing, production, or messaging could trigger a disproportionate response from buyers who are watching closely for signs of weakness. This is the downside of making a bombshell move. Once attention is locked in, there is no hiding from the consequences. Internally, accountability is tightening, performance targets are being revisited, and departments that once operated with relative autonomy are now being measured against stricter financial metrics. That kind of shift often leads to faster decisions, but also internal friction, as long-term vision collides with short-term survival. Mercedes is clearly choosing discipline over tradition, and that choice carries cultural consequences. There's also growing pressure from regulators and policymakers, particularly around emissions targets and electrification commitments. Balancing compliance with profitability has become increasingly complex. This bombshell may give Mercedes temporary flexibility, but it does not erase the long-term obligations the company faces. How it navigates that tension will shape its credibility for the next decade. Brand storytelling is entering a fragile phase. Mercedes must now convince buyers that this shift is intentional and intelligent, not reactive and desperate. That narrative battle is just as important as the financial mechanics behind it. Lose control of the story, and competitors will define it for them. In the background, talent retention is becoming a quiet concern. Engineers, designers, and executives pay close attention when a company changes direction this sharply. If confidence wavers internally, the risk of brain drain increases, especially as tech and mobility companies continue to recruit aggressively. Meanwhile, consumer trust remains the most delicate variable. Trust takes years to build and seconds to fracture. Mercedes is attempting to preserve that trust while rewriting the rules that created it. That is an extraordinarily difficult balance, and it explains why every statement, every pricing change, and every product update now feels so deliberate and controlled. The broader market is learning a hard lesson from this moment. Luxury is no longer insulated from economic gravity. When one of the strongest brands in the world adjusts its stance, it confirms what many suspected but few wanted to admit. The market has changed, and denial is no longer an option. As this chapter continues to unfold, the real test will be whether buyers accept this new version of Mercedes as credible and compelling, or whether this bombshell becomes the first visible crack in a foundation that once seemed unbreakable. Because the next moves, already being quietly prepared, will either stabilize the brand or push it into even more dramatic territory that could reshape the entire industry yet again and redefine what power truly looks like in the modern car market.